The Liberty Weekly podcast is brought to you by Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. Sick of losing arguments with your statist friends? Fear no more. Now you can vanquish your intellectual foes with courses taught by top libertarian professors. Tool your intellectual arsenal and enroll today by navigating to www.libertyweekly.net/Liberty Classroom or by following the link in the show notes page.
I wanted to preface with a video showing you how a police officer physically assaulted me before. Now this video happened during Occupy Wall Street, where me and my friends thought we saw a police officer dressed up as Antifa. We started filming him, and then...
Look for a picture? Hey, don't put your hand on me.
This police officer jumped over a barricade and punched me because I was filming him. Now, how do I know he was a police officer? Well, I pretty much chased him down the street screaming at police officers to arrest the man who just physically punched me.
This man just assaulted me. Can you guys please take care of him? Just assaulted me. I have it on video. Guys, this guy just assaulted me.
To which, no surprise to me at all, the police officers just let him go. But I didn't stop and followed this man for a block and a half with other police officers, not letting him go away until he had to go behind police lines in order to fully avoid me. I also saw the same man later that night at the protest, confronted him again until he had to run into a police vehicle to escape me. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because I saw an old 1969 COINTELPRO document that has been declassified that specifically specified how the US government needed to exacerbate racial tensions on purpose in order to weaken the anti-war movement. You can see the document in full, which will be in the description below. Now does that remind you of anything that could be possibly happening today? It's been well documented that the NYPD had agent provocateurs, police officers dressed up as activists during Occupy Wall Street to incite violence. This is why I kept an eye out for agent provocateurs and police officers dressed up as Antifa in New York City because I knew what they were up to. And because of that, I had to face repercussions from the NYPD. That beat the crap out of me on a number of instances, knowing who I was, and unsuccessfully didn't deter us from actually continuing to do this very important job. We even have a whole playlist on our YouTube channel of all the things we have to go through because we were uncovering these agent provocateurs, which will also be linked in the description below so you can see it for yourself. And the reasons I'm bringing all of this up is to expose to you right now how COINTELPRO 2.0 is well and alive in the United States right now, and it's being used against all of us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Weekly podcast. As always, I'm your host, Patrick McFarland, and returning to the show today...
I thought I was always on the show. Isn't that our spot?
I'm supposed to... So our little joke is that, in the beginning I always say, and joining me as always is the co-host, Jerry McCullum, except he wouldn't always be joining me, so, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jerry's back on the show in this episode. We kind of worked out a little broadcasting plan. We're shooting for, once every other week we'll do a show together.
Yeah, and maybe if we're really excited, we'll record 2 shows at once, or maybe we'll even break the schedule and do it more frequently,
Yeah,
but
we're going to try and at least stick to once every other week.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have that. But so today our topic is Antifa and free speech or free expression. Free speech is a phrase that's thrown around. It's the buzz phrase, isn't it?
Nowadays it is.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about that. What happened last night?
Some things occurred at Berkeley. To be honest, I haven't looked into the details exactly, but Ben Shapiro was giving a talk, and then there was a whole bunch of there's fighting between Antifa and I'm assuming people that went to go see conservatives and people who are against Antifa.
The ironic thing about it is that Ben Shapiro is a Jew, I think. He's Jewish.
Oh, yes, he's Jewish.
And
he doesn't like Trump.
He's a fascist? He's a Nazi?
I don't know. There's a lot of signs talking, saying like white supremacists fuck off or go home around the on the campus there.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Maybe that's not directed at Ben Shapiro exactly, but I would think, I imagine that quite a few of them are. I'm assuming, but I think most people would. I'm sure Ben Shapiro has been maligned with the label of white supremacist.
Yeah. I know he has, but I think the real story here, and I wanted to mention this before we forget, there's Jerry has new housemates.
Yeah. I live in a duplex sort of thing. People above me moved out, new people here. They're not as cool as the last ones because they make more goddamn noise. But that's it. So if you hear some noises, we apologize. It's just the situation that we're in.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed, and I said this in my Let's Plays that I've been doing. Oh, I got to plug this too. We'll get back to the Berkeley thing.
Yeah, we play video games.
Yes.
Or should I say that Patrick plays video games?
You do too. Come on.
Not
now I've
filmed.
been recording them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started doing these Let's Plays where I talk about whatever the fuck I want to say, and I swear in them a lot because that's what you do when you play video games. But I've been talking about legal theory when I'm playing Doom and stuff. And I think it's just been, it's really easy because I can just record it with OBS real quick and then upload it. And I don't have to do any editing. So it's literally me, like I have to hit a button before I play the game. And then when I'm done, I hit the button again. And then I take the video file and put it on YouTube. And without that simplicity, it wouldn't be happening. But now I'm trying to drive more traffic to the show. And so I'll include links to that in the show notes page. And if you want to check that out, it's like a whole new lots of episodes of the podcast. And it's helped me do extemporaneous speaking and to feel a little more comfortable on the mic. So I like that as well. But as I was saying in my Let's Plays, I live near the road. My apartment is near the road and there's ambient traffic noises. Except I've noticed that they don't get into the recording. So we've mentioned, but they might not even hear anything at all. So, but anyways, I think the real story of Berkeley is the police response to Antifa because they cracked the hell down.
Yeah, for once.
Yeah.
That was one thing that surprised me is that it looked like they were taking things seriously this time, which is good. It may sound strange for. I don't know the details, I'll admit, so I don't know if the response was done well or not. But this is something that I think is really important, is that things like police are security services are an industry monopolized by the government, but it's still a service that people desire and want. And it's good that it sounds like they did something instead of just leaving like they normally have been doing in Berkeley and in other places as well.
Or, well, the video I saw from Luke at We Are Change. So people were in a scrum and they were just yelling at each other and stuff. And there was one push
and then
swarm of pigs. Bacon was dropped. Sorry. I've become a lot more radicalized about police recently. I don't want to misrepresent your views on it. I don't think I've probably stayed the same. I've purposely started. I purposely say road pirates now. Yeah.
Most of the time, but that's more sarcastic, and I just think it's funny. But yeah, no, I'm at the same. I don't appreciate them. I don't have to interact with them ever, though, which is great.
Maybe what changed with me is that I saw Straight Outta Compton, and then I developed an appreciation for gangster rap, like the true gangster rap that's about living tough in the city and not about, bitches, money, and drugs.
It's about
the stuff about
the hustle,
the hard life. The original stuff from NWA and Dr. Dre, that kind of lynch mob stuff. They have like different groups. I don't know too much about it, so I can't.
I'm sure we're betraying our ignorance right now.
Yeah,
there are people screaming into their headphones.
Yeah, it could be. That's okay.
Please forgive us.
Please forgive me and us.
But leave a comment telling us about how we're wrong.
Yeah,
because it will boost our interactivity.
Our knowledge. The more you interact with our posts, the more exposure they get on any media social media. I think that's a general rule. So yeah, we were going to talk a bit about Antifa and free speech and stuff. I think I really wanted to include a clip from Mance Rayder from the Free Man Beyond the Wall podcast because Mance has reached out to me and we're planning an interview to happen in the next week. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to talk about yet, but I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. And he had a really good early episode about Antifa. So I'm going to include that clip here to kind of introduce the history of Antifa.
The title of this podcast is Antifa, the Founders and Its Modern Counterfeit. Antifa, I think we all know, stands for anti-fascist. And first thing I want to do is I want to go back and talk about the term fascism. In the 20th century, most people would say that Mussolini was the one who really brought it to the forefront in 1921. Mussolini had 3 points about fascism that you won't find in the dictionary, you're probably not going to find it in a history book in the schools. The first thing he said was that everything belongs in the state. The state is supreme government. The state controls all. Second thing is nothing outside of the state. Mussolini wanted to rule the world. He believed that every human should submit to government. Now, we know he never got to rule the world, and he tried to do a couple things that failed, but this is the principles of what he believed. The third thing, nothing against the state. No questioning the government. If you do, you must be destroyed, lest you infect others. He was worried that if anybody came along and started speaking against it, that they would talk to others, and people would start questioning whether the government should be in charge of everything. Just a little bit more about Mussolini. He started the National Fascist Party November 9th, 1921. Its whole basis was nationalism and expansion of Italian territories. He saw it as the heir to ancient Rome. The economic system he saw as controlling private industry in hopes of resolving class conflict through class collaboration. Basically, that sounds like collectivism to me. Mussolini opposed Marxism because he saw it as inherently anti-nationalistic. All right, let's use that as a jumping off point into talking about anti-fascism, which is actually a phrase that was coined by Benito Mussolini. In response to the fascism, what we know today as anti-fascism, the party Arditi del Popolo, which means the people's daring one, made up of revolutionary trade unionists, socialists, communists, anarchists, Republicans, and some former military officers, was formed. A lot of things were coming out at that time. A gentleman named Benedetto Croce wrote Manifesto of the Anti-Fascist Intellectuals in 1925, speaking out against Mussolini. There was a lot of the people who were anti-fascist back then were former military. So as opposed to what we see today, these people actually could fight. So let me jump into a little bit of what they did and how they failed back then. On September 11th, 1926, Gino Lucetti, an Italian anarchist, attempted to assassinate Mussolini by throwing a bomb against his car, and to no effect. He was arrested, stood trial, found guilty, was sentenced to 30 years in 1927. And the irony of all ironies is, in 1943, he escaped with help, but was killed by a German bombing raid on the island of Ischia off of Naples. The fascists got him anyway. Jumping into modern Antifa. I want to give you my take because I don't know that I've heard anybody talk about this before. Maybe somebody's mentioned it, but I believe I came up with this on my own, even though I listened to a lot of different people. My take is that they're trying to move what is happening on campus with shutting down free speech, with controlling people's lives, with controlling people's actions, their thoughts, and they're trying to move it into society. They see that they're failing on campuses, that people are actually fighting back, that they're getting bad press. And I just believe it's a overreaction, and they're going to try and bring it to society. I don't know how these people think that they can actually succeed in doing this, but they're trying. Not for good, though. The original Antifa went after the government. They went after the black shirts, the paramilitary. They tried to kill Mussolini. Modern Antifa, they're going after people that are marching for freedom. They're going after statists. They're going after libertarians. They're going after ANCAPs. They're not daring to go full bore against cops, military, government, FBI. They're a pale comparison to what the people that they're taking the name from, the people that they're trying to uphold their legacy. Now, I'm not saying that I want them to go do this, because if they go up against cops, go up against the military, go up against the FBI, go up against the alphabet agencies, they're going to be destroyed. And I think a lot of these people are just bored rich kids who learn some things from their college professors, and they hate their parents for being rich, although they won't give their trust funds back. They seem like bored kids to me.
Okay, so you just heard from Mance about the history of Antifa, and I thought it was really interesting because he kind of talks about how the original Antifa, the anti-fascists, were from Italy, and it was against Benito Mussolini, and it wasn't just communists, it was also Republicans and more free market types that were actually physically fighting the fascists, and I just thought it was interesting to include here.
Definitely, it's a different kind of organization that is now.
Yeah, but the main highlight of it is that, like he said, you just heard, the original anti-fascists were against the state. They were against the brown shirts, and they were against the government, and they actually knew how to fight too. And as opposed to now, anti-fascist means we're going to fight against private citizens and people expressing free speech.
And Starbuckses.
Yeah, and trash cans. But one thing that always confuses me about the Antifa crowd is how they want to take things violent and make it confrontational, but they have no ability and no knowledge of firearms and weapons. And this is something that has kind of been brought up before, but I have a law school friend, whom I appreciate very much. He's a very good guy, but he is from the left persuasion, and he thinks Antifa is great because they're fighting the oppressors, and he has even condoned the violence too.
I'm guessing here, but is it sort of like he wants to see that Marxist violent revolution?
He's not a Marxist. He is just like I don't even know. He looks at things through the Marxist lens, but he's not a Marxist.
Okay.
He's more of a socialist, probably a Bernieite. He was a Bernieite, but he likes the bash the fash and that kind of stuff. And I even presented to him and a friend that I am all about bringing people together. And Tim Pool had a really, really good, after Charlottesville happened, had a really good episode, video blog about how we're just escalating violence. And I thought he was so right when he was talking about how we really need to sit down and realize that we have common motivations and not common goals, but we're coming from a concern for our family and for people we care about, and we want things to work,
It's at its very core, these people are they don't believe themselves to be evil. They believe themselves to be doing something right.
Yeah. So, but another thing I wanted to talk about was Luke had videos where he's interacted with Antifa. Obviously, that's what Luke does, goes to these events. But he has documented video evidence of agent provocateurs amongst both the Nazi side and the Antifa side, police officers that are in there escalating the violence.
Yeah, I remember hearing about this I know this has been happening for years, and it's very concerning. It's very it's very dystopic.
And I can't remember if it was Luke was filming this guy who was a police officer, and I'll include the link in the show notes page. Either that or I'll mess around with the audio or something and add it. But essentially, the guy assaults Luke, and then walks past a whole bunch of police officers, and Luke says, "This man assaulted me. He's a police officer." Mm-hmm. And they're walking past cops who are standing there, and he's like, "Will you stop him and arrest him?" And from a lawyer standpoint, I think that is reasonable grounds for a Terry stop. Because at a Terry stop, you have to have...
I have no idea what a Terry stop is. Let me know.
Oh, okay. So in constitutional law, Terry v. Ohio, I think it is, states that in order for a police officer to stop someone, they have to have reasonable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. And in order to do that, you can only detain someone long enough to investigate your suspicion. And to go further from there, you have to acquire probable cause in order to go further. Or you have to get consent, or you have to get an exception to the warrant requirement. And there's a lot more to that. But initially, to make a stop, you have to have reasonable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. And to get that, you can rely on your faculties as an officer and your experience. But someone walking past officers saying, "That man just assaulted me, I have it on video camera," I think would be reasonable suspicion that criminal activity was afoot. So he must have been an agent provocateur or something. That or the police just don't care. I mean, both are possible.
This was a long time ago, but I think I recall someone saying that man was also wearing like the same kind of boots as the other police officers.
Yes, yep, that's part of the video too. Yeah,
which is unusual, that they would be sharing parts of their uniform.
And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, the whole divide and conquer narrative is just, so apparent in everything. And that's why I tried to present the idea of, okay, guys, like, I know you're from the other side of the persuasion, but can't we just be reasonable? Can't we, and I was saying, too, the real Nazis in this country are like 0.3% of the population or 0.03% of the population.
Mm-hmm. And at least when I think of the Democratic Workers' Party, isn't that what they're called? Like there are orders of neo-Nazis that are very explicit about, yes, we are Nazis, like this is what we do. And at least...
Yeah, real Nazis will tell you that they're Nazis, and they're not ashamed of it either.
Some people, at least, I guess, I don't think we can say that all are, but I personally think it's really important to, if you're going to call people something that they don't identify themselves at, you have to have a really solid and firm ground to stand on and a firm definition to use. And there are very few people that will stand up to that Nazi or neo-Nazi label out there.
Yeah.
Personally, to me, Nazi doesn't mean anything anymore when it's coming out of the mouth of someone from Antifa or someone on the left, someone that is not a political commentator who doesn't have a
dog in the fight.
A dog in the fight.
Yeah. But this whole thing has implications on free speech. And what I was saying too in my Let's Play. So the first Let's Play that I did, I was playing Doom chapters 1 and 2, and I have not been impressed with it.
Really, everyone seemed to like it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Watch the Let's Play to see why. I kind of explain it, but alas, I kind of put my foot in my mouth in the first episode, and I felt like I did, and I said I don't believe in free speech. I said free speech doesn't matter to me, really. And I kind of explained that I was in Yale for 4 years, and I did the tabling, I did the campus activism. I'm over it. And that doesn't mean I don't support free speech as a general policy. But moreover, we were talking before we went on, too, about how we don't necessarily think that free speech is a natural right. And I think my general theory of what rights is that it's everything boils down to property rights, essentially. And so there's no right to privacy. And that implicates the Fourth Amendment and search and seizure and stuff. Facially, whatever the government does is invalid anyways. So
any law or principle that limits what the government can do is good, but it's not like, oh, in our free society there's going to be the Fourth Amendment will exist and no one will be able to be unreasonably searched on other people's property. It's like, no, they'll be able to, people can do what they want on their own property, and we think that it won't, and we don't believe unreasonable things will happen because it's going to be voluntary and people are going to treat each other well because of it's voluntary. The things like unreasonable searches and seizures and free speech and those sort of things only are important principles in an involuntary environment, where there's something that you need to cling on to, to try to, because there's something that at least theoretically is supposed to stop an infraction of your rights.
Well, I think that what I've kind of been doing with the podcast lately too, and the audience is up to speed too, but I've been doing more scholarly stuff, but I wanted to specialize myself in taking my formal legal training and sharing it with the broader liberty movement. One thing in a voluntary legal system, I think that if you subscribe to a certain court system, you would be able to, they would have a policy for search and seizure, because if you're suspected of stealing shit from someone, they need to be able to search you, I think. But moreover, it would be so narrowly tailored to any evidence that might, be involved with the crime. So you don't have them busting into your home, shooting your dog, and, for drugs.
Flashbanging your baby.
Yeah, flashbanging your baby for drugs. Because, and you wouldn't be too afraid either because of it, because they can't arbitrarily come in and find anything arbitrary. They're there specifically just to solve the crime.
And I think this is something that I go back to really often, is that that the chances of them being shitty or them doing a poor job are significantly less because they are trying to keep your service, or they're trying to keep other people's service who might witness what happens.
Their reputation, and they're subject to personal liability too. Either the company is, they're the agents of the company. But I guess I don't want to dwell on this too much because we're talking about free speech. But that would be the idea generally.
Yeah, something that we were talking about before is that, like we said, like, we don't think free speech is a natural right, but personally, I have an aesthetic preference for it, a very strong one. Yeah. And I think most people in the liberty movement do. And currently, most people who are on the conservative side of the of the left-right divide are in favor of free speech, which I'm just going to say here, I'm going to attempt to read their minds and say that I don't think it's actually because they stand for the principle of it. I think it's because they're currently they're the out group now. They're currently the out group. The conservative culture is on the back foot, while because in the 60s it was the left that was in favor of free speech, and that was because they were on the back foot at that time. And so I don't think it's because I just want to have this aside. I don't think it's because that conservatives have a principle opposing free speech. I just think that currently they don't have a principle for free speech. I just think that it's currently preferable for them to have that. But something that I've started calling is I have a preference for freedom of expression, because I try to separate it from the legal idea of
the First
Amendment and free speech, because they are different, and I don't want people to confuse what I'm talking about. So I say like I'm very much in favor of freedom of expression, because I want the websites that I use to not decide what content is or is not allowed for my eyes to see. I want them to display anything that people might want to, even if it's hateful or gross or not safe for work or profane or whatnot. I want to be the person that chooses what content I want to consume, and I don't want the people around me to, and myself included in this, I don't want anyone to feel like if they express the things that they believe in or discuss the ideas that they have, even if they are hateful or outrageous or ridiculous. I don't want them to be in fear for their lives or their job or their income or even or necessarily their reputation. I mean, to some degree. And of course, if you're someone who is if their beliefs are directly related to their job, I think that's something that it's reasonable for them that could affect your employment. But if it's like, these are what my ideas of politics are, and you happen to work at Starbucks, I don't think that I think it's kind of ridiculous for someone. I don't think there's any good reason for someone to be fired from a Starbucks or to people or to be ousted from that environment just because they may believe something that is controversial.
Or, yeah, that's called the chilling effect.
Yeah.
Is in Supreme Court opinions, they've referenced what's called the chilling effect for libel. I think it's mostly libel and slander.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a public figure, obviously you get less protection from speech. But it's called the chill. They've labeled it the chilling effect. Is that if we instigate this policy, will it chill free discussion of? And in certain ways, the Supreme Court has been very protective of free speech, what we would call free speech under the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
But in other ways, it has not been.
And I know, personally, I'm not proud of this, but I definitely have felt the chilling effect and have acted on it personally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not courageous, I'm not proud of it, but it's absolutely something that I feel. And I would suspect that a lot of people do nowadays. And something I think is really crazy right now is this effect of the more I think about it, the less crazy it is. But when this first started happening, when first people of the left started trying to dox people or to get them labeled as Nazi and tried to get them ousted out of their jobs or out of their speaking positions or that sort of thing, I was really surprised because I was like, oh, it's society trying to suppress culture or speech and that sort of thing. And now that it's not government agents, it's people acting on their ideals. And now that I've done some more thinking about history, it's not that strange because there's this has happened in Mao's China. It's not something that is actually so unusual throughout history, but half a year ago, this was quite shocking to me.
Or, I mean, if you look at Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, not 1984, that's what I was going to say. But, it's the people that ban the books.
But just to expound upon this free expression thing, I don't think that, what I call free expression is a libertarian principle, although I think that the people that are libertarians and the people that hold this opinion overlap quite a substantial amount. But I can't argue from an ethics perspective, but I really think that a lack of freedom of expression is something that leads to totalitarian cultures, or so I think that or it's it's either an effect or it's something that can be the beginning of it, because right now it's people are we're seeing now that the people are fascist are being targeted, but fascist now means quite a lot of different things. A lot of people who are not fascists are being called that, and it's like McCarthyism. There's a lot of people who are either used to be communists or tangentially related to people who were communists or whatnot, and they had their careers ruined, that sort of thing. And that's something that I think is terrible. And even though I despise communism, and I think it's a terrible idea, I absolutely think that those actions that were done during that era, the blacklisting of artists and that sort of thing, was a terrible force. And while I can't say that it was unethical, if it was being carried out by the government, it was. But just outside of that, I can't say that's unethical. But I can say that I think it's very much against my preferences.
Yeah.
And maybe eventually I'll find a stronger way to describe it than against my preferences. But I do think that it it leads to people's rights being violated.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that people who are not fascists are being called fascists. And I guess it's kind of obvious, but at the same time, it's like you get this pack-like mentality of people who think they know what they're talking about, but they really don't. Mm-hmm. And but on the flip side, some of these people who we would call alt-right, because I think the alt-right itself they're focused on white nationalism. I watched a video,
it's
Richard Spencer types.
Yeah, absolutely. The Richard Spencer types are. I want to make a brief aside. But when I first started hearing the term alt-right, what alt-right meant was you're a conservative who's not a neocon, and that's what it meant. Like when I was on poll like 2 years ago, that's what alt-right meant. It meant you're not a neocon, and now, because of Hillary and because of Richard Spencer, now it means something a lot different than that. So I'm not sure where the majority of people who would call themselves alt-right stand, but I want to acknowledge that term has morphed and changed over a really, over the past 2 years or so, because I don't know I don't know what someone who is not a neocon, who is conservative, would call themselves. Yeah. I don't know if there's a term for that anymore, since it seems like alt-right has been cast to a different group now.
Yeah, like a regular ass conservative. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very strange, but I think the white nationalists, what they really want, they sound more akin to like socialists.
Oh,
which
absolutely,
is confusing. Yeah. So they're just
Richard Spencer wants universal health care.
Yeah, like so one. That's just so, but so they essentially want the same thing, except Richard Spencer wants it to benefit whites, and he wants I want to say the word apartheid, but that's not right. He wants the separation of, like, he wants, in essence, he kind of wants the state to help white people, but what he's calling for is a segregation.
Yeah, but it sounds
basically we both pick up our toys and go home.
I'm assuming this. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that as someone who is a white nationalist, is what they're interested in is a white nationalist within the context of the United States probably either wants all the people who are not white to be sent out of the country, or
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Or they would be interested in like the balkanization of the United States. I don't know if either of those things are something that Richard Spencer has explicitly called for, but that's my assumptions of those are really the only options that I could see for someone advocating for, the only like practical options that someone who is an American white nationalist interested in white nationalism in the United States could advocate for. That's I think that's the thrust that they're going for now.
Yeah, it's strange to me. It's like there's that Rick and Morty meme where Morty and Summer are sitting there and Rick is like hitting the board and he says, one is Antifa and one is alt-right, and he's like, you're both idiots and I can prove it mathematically. Mm-hmm. It's like, can't you realize that you're both the same?
Yeah,
that you're both obsessed with race and class.
Yeah, and they're at least from, I need to look into this a lot more, but as far as I understand it, a big part of fascism originally was being anti-communist. It was something that maybe not reactionary is the right term, but it was something that was explicitly opposed to it. And Hitler wrote at length about how he hated capitalism and how capitalism was bad. And so this, fascism is not a friend of free markets as we would see them. And you'd be a friend of, corporatism, and what we would refer to as a fascist economy, which is
our current economy,
which is the collusion of big
private
interests, and
well, what about the argument? Because I have another law school friend who, I don't know, he's like your basic left person, and he was saying how it's funny that they say that Antifa's, that Nazis socialists too. So, okay, yeah, so people will try and fight the left by saying that Nazis are also socialist. And he said, oh, well, Nazis aren't socialist because they only named it National Socialist German Workers' Party to attract the socialists, and that there's nothing socialist about Nazis. And then I was like, well, Nazism is private collusion between government and private interests. So, I mean, is that socialism? Because social is what the workers own the means of production.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's for sure it's advocating for a mixed economy, if not much closer to a command economy.
Yeah.
You know.
So I don't. I guess. So would Nazis be socialists?
Something that I've come to start seeing is that a lot of the terms describing systems of economics are different from one side of the fence than the other.
Yeah.
So I don't know what this person means when they say socialist, because I know what I think of when I say socialist, which is
collective workers own the means of production.
Yeah, exactly. And when I say capitalism, it's the absence of government involved as much as possible in the free market. But when
private ownership of the means of production.
Yeah. But when you talk to a communist, and what they describe capitalism as is cronyism. They describe capitalism as including the collusion of the state with private enterprise, and then they describe communism as something that is that involves an absence of the state, which to us is absolutely absurd, because we're like, no, communism is USSR.
Yeah,
it's 5-year plans.
Yeah,
it's the great leap forward. It's a command economy. It is bureaucrats telling individuals what they're going to do. It's private individuals not owning capital, not being allowed to own any capital, and all the capital being in the hands of bureaucrats who are dictating what should be done with it.
Yeah, and that's how it always ends up. Essentially. Yeah. So Nazi, and I was thinking here, Nazi is socialism, because I think that Nazism purports that the means of production would be owned publicly, except just by white Aryans.
As far as I can tell, it's if not socialism, it's very close. It is hold on, sorry. That Nazism
would be public ownership of the means of production by Aryan whites, but fascism would be private ownership of the means of productions in collusion with the state. Because there's a difference between Nazistic fascism and regular ass fascism that Benito Mussolini proposed. I think
this is. Yeah. I don't. I personally, I know that there are differences, but I don't know about the differences in economic systems.
Yeah.
What I know from, at least, this is something I need to learn more about. But fascism is talking about, like the leaders of industry will be conjoined with the state, and through that conjoining, they'll be able to make something that is better and will go above what could be made under just a capitalist system. And while socialism sounds like the ultimate goal of socialism would be public means of production of all things, fascism sounds like, to me, it's not necessarily. To me, fascism sounds like it's not necessarily all things, but it's the things that are important. It's the factories that are making cars or tanks. It's the banks. It's it's the leaders of industry. So I don't know. I don't think fascism would care much about the small business owner. It wouldn't be interested in seizing small business owners' capital, while socialists might be. That's the difference that I know. But there, again, if you define, if you think of socialism as just being like a a certain amount of, a command economy. Like fascism is very close to that. I think of them as very close to each other.
Centrally planned.
Centrally from my view. But I kind of, something that I think is important is that someone who is on that left-right, spectrum. Sorry, I'm getting tangential, but I was thinking of how to describe how I view the political spectrum to someone who has no idea about anything that I'm into. And I would, you describe the horseshoe, where at the top of one time is communism and the top of the other is fascism, and how they move close to each other. And then I would describe my stance as being, there's the bottom of the horseshoe, and then there's a line that just goes down from it, and then I would be down there,
diametrically opposed.
That's how I would describe that. And so, but if someone who is still stuck on this, who's stuck on this horseshoe, they're not going to be, they're not concerned with the authoritarianism or the command aspect of it. There's going to be different issues that they are obsessing over, most likely. I would assume. And so, and it may even be differences that are really only in name, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it would be, communists are doing this for, the good of the people, for the good of the proletariat, while fascists is doing it for the good of the country. And while really in the end, it's the same thing happening. It's someone's capital being stolen and given power over to the state. And it's in the end both being done for most likely an increase in that state's power, and not to benefit the citizens of that country. The lip service given is different, and I think that people on that left-right divide would care a lot about that lip service. While we're over here and we're just seeing people's stuff is getting stolen. Yeah. This is terrible.
Yeah. They're stuck in the question of like, what should we do about X? Or what should be done about X? And we're like, nothing.
Yeah. And we're like, it will solve itself. The market will give the answer. Or it'd be a question of like, how should we lift the people of our country out of oppression? And they would be like, oh, we're going to do it through this means. And other, fascists would say, we're going to do it through this means, and we would be like, I don't know. They're not, if there's no state, they're not oppressed. So,
yeah. Well, what I really should do is read Mises's Socialism, because that's the definitive work about, from our perspective. I have it at home. It's sitting on my shelf. Mm-hmm. I should crack it. But I think we should start to bring this to a close here. We're bridging on 42 minutes of at least our conversation without the plugs. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our Patreon page. If you like what we do, find us on Patreon by navigating to patreon.com/Liberty Weekly. Subscribers are going to get early access to this material, to unedited versions of this material. And they will also get access to our pre-show conversation in our bloopers and extras bit too. So I'm going to throw that up there probably tonight or tomorrow morning. Also, we have our Murray Rothbard pixelated t-shirts on sale. I'll include a link for that in the show notes page as well. Sign up for our email list to get personalized content updates from me. And be sure to check out my Let's Plays of Doom. It's like a whole nother show. Like, you get even more access to what we do here. So be sure to check that out. I will include links to that in the show notes page as well. If you're just a regular subscriber to us on YouTube, you will have already seen it. So thank you. And other than that, we just really appreciate that you would take time out of your busy day to listen to us talk about these issues. It really does mean a lot to us. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you. And it's good to be back.
Very good. Okay. So thanks again. We'll talk to you next time.
The Liberty Weekly podcast is brought to you by Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. Sick of losing arguments with your statist friends? Fear no more. Now you can vanquish your intellectual foes with courses taught by top libertarian professors. Tool your intellectual arsenal and enroll today by navigating to www.libertyweekly.net/Liberty Classroom, or by following the link in the show notes page.